Welcome to Let Loose, the podcast dedicated to all things the Gym Leader Challenge. And today, we're shifting away from Gym Leader Challenge a little bit because we have such an awesome host today. We got Joe from Twinleaf. Joe, what is up, my friend?
Not a lot, just coming off of a couple challenge wins. Just really, I kind of actually stepped away from Twinleaf stuff this week just to kind of get back in the game itself. I felt like I was like getting too far away from playing Pokemon to like enjoy working on Twinleaf. But yeah, I guess now that I'm kind of settling down, waiting for Baltimore Regionals to come up, not that I'm like going or competing, but just to like watch it, I feel like invigorated again to get back to working on Twinleaf.
That's awesome. I kind of did the same thing, it's been a while since I've kind of put a gameplay video of me out there playing Gym Leader Challenge, and it's just like I'd gotten away from brewing, which is so much of what this like format is about. And so just like you, I've kind of like gotten back into like the game side, back into playing with my locals, and it really has invigorated me. It's made me feel a lot better about like what type of content I do want to produce. So yeah, I feel you there 100%.
When you're like doing content and stuff, like you kind of go back and forth between like wanting to do the content and then like, so you spend like a couple weeks on like grinding content, and you spend a couple weeks like playing, and it kind of like is a yo-yo back and forth. Yeah,
it's tough to like balance the expectations. Like there aren't any expectations, right? But like there's these perceived expectations of like what I'm supposed to be doing, and for you too, I'm sure, like for Twinleaf, like what you want Twinleaf to be is maybe different than what maybe you're hearing from other people. So I feel like maybe that is out there too, and it's hard to balance. So like taking a break, always a good thing. And that's why it's great to have you on, because we get to talk, maybe not Gym Leader Challenge specific stuff. I mean, you're a Gym Leader Challenge hero, whether you want to be or not, Joe, just because like the day that PTCGO went away, like so many of us were waiting for what you're doing right now. Like the moment I stepped into the beta program was like the day I had been waiting for over a year. So in my eyes, like you are a Gym Leader Challenge hero, and our community needs to know more about you. Joe, tell us about yourself, dude. What's up with you?
I guess like if we want to start with me before Pokemon, I actually didn't really get back into it until around COVID. Spent most of my life just making like small video games. I fell in love with like the Sonic the Hedgehog series when I was a kid. And I kind of liked making little platformers and things like that. That's what got me into coding. And I kind of just like made a bunch of small games. Wanted to always do something big and ambitious, but never followed through or like never finished anything until kind of this. I mean, it's not finished yet, but right around COVID, I tried getting back into card games. I was big into Yu-Gi-Oh for a while, but it was really hard to play with people. Didn't really have like a proper online client, and the game just wasn't good anymore. Like it wasn't as good as I was when I was a kid. So that's kind of when I shifted to Pokemon. I was like, I want something nostalgic. And I think what's nice about Pokemon for me when I started getting back into it was like there's not tens of thousands of creatures that I don't recognize anymore. The Pokemon that were there were the ones I remembered as a kid. And the game was so simple to learn. PTCGO was still out. It still existed at the time. So it was like a fantastic client to kind of dip my toes back in. I shouldn't say back in. I didn't really play it when I was a kid. I collected the cards, but to kind of like learn the game. My first deck was the Leon Charizard from Vivid Voltage, and then Shadow Rider Calyrex from Chilling Reign. Up until I made the terrible mistake of joining the live beta and transferring my account a year before I really had to. And I think maybe about 2 months into the beta of live, I was like, I have to make something else. I cannot stand like it. I was starting to fall out of love with the game, maybe 6 months into me playing it, and that felt so bad because I had met so many amazing people in like the Tricky Gym community primarily, and I was like, there has to be something else. So I just started working on something. I first started on some stuff from scratch, tried like manual simulators. It wasn't really it for me. I was like, I want automated. I want it to be easy. I want people to be able to do whatever they want. I want something enjoyable, something nice to look at, because I find a lot of these other simulators are not really like pretty from like a UI perspective. Um, and I went on GitHub and I found this simulator called Ryu Play, and Ryu Play is a very bare bones Pokemon simulator that's open sourced. So I hit up the creator. We worked on a couple things together, and then I just completely took over it, and it became what it is today. I met Eric. I brought him onto the team. Um, and well, I guess before I met Eric, Dan TDM, the YouTuber, kind of brought me together with Charlie Lockyer and Jake Gearhart, and we kind of started working on it together there. Um, and then when we needed more help, I brought in Eric, then eventually Tommy, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. Like hearing kind of what the story was at the beginning, because I know that you started it first. I know that Dan was involved in some capacity, and because I'm so involved with the online Gym Leader Challenge community, most of what my Twinleaf experience has been through Eric, who we know as Weeder, and kind of what he's done. So hearing it from your side, and your background's more standard, although our background is very similar. It sounds like when it comes to Pokemon, because just like you, I collected on the playground, never really played in the late '90s, early thousands, and then I came back to it, and I found my nostalgia in Gym Leader Challenge because again I wanted to play my bad Pokemon, and that's where I was at. So single prize Pokemon was where I was at. So getting to hear kind of the beginnings is really, really interesting for me. And of course, Twinleaf is coming soon, we hope, and more stuff to tell us about that. Let me pull it up here as we go. And it looks like maybe it ended up getting closed out, but just so that everyone knows too, before we get into the nitty gritty of it, follow Joe on Twitter at @the_EPSD, and of course on Twitch too. I know you don't do a ton of Twitch stuff, but I know you had been talking about maybe doing some more like Twinleaf test here and there.
I want to, yeah. I want to like maybe stream me as I code. Especially like when we launch, it'll be easier to stream me coding because we plan on open sourcing it day one. So like I won't be afraid to show off the code at that point because it's out there for everyone. But yeah, follow me on Twitch, guys. I really want to get back into it.
Yeah, we'd love to. And Twinleaf is coming soon, and I have this as like one of our first questions, just because let's get it out of the way. When is Twinleaf going to be an open beta, Joe? And give us whatever answer you want. We'll be happy about it.
I love just saying soon and kind of leaving it at that. There's a reason that I kind of say it like that, and it's because we never really know what's up next that we need to kind of knock out before we launch. When we got to about the middle of the open beta program, which is kind of I think around the time that you joined, we brought in the guy who created TCGmasters.net. If you haven't tried it out, it's a fantastic single-player simulator for standard. He found a ton of security flaws. I'm talking like you could see our database username and password in the code just by like inspecting in your browser. He found that you can like see the other person's hand. What you can see everyone's prizes, and we fixed all that stuff. So that was like the big hump to get over. That's really what we've been like grinding the last couple months over, because from an engine standpoint, I consider it done. And really, I think the last thing that we're working on is an image system. It was talked about a little bit by Dan on the Uncommon Energy podcast, but essentially, we can't release it and have people use it with the card images already being there. So when it goes open beta, there's not going to be any card images. You're going to know what cards are because they'll have a little label on them, but it's kind of up to users to figure out how to get them there. And that's the very last system that we have to finish before we can put it out. I'm not working on that. That's 100% being worked on by Charlie, who, as some of you may know, was on a Worlds run. He went to Worlds, he killed it, and now that that's kind of over, obviously he's going to be starting his new season and all that, but now that that's kind of out of the way, then he has a lot more time to work on that. So I really don't want to give an exact date, but I hope it'll be within the next month.
Yeah, awesome. That's better than I thought. I know that you're tight-lipped on it, but I did want to go ahead and get away because I know that people watching this are going to want to know that. First off, when can they start using Twinleaf? Of course, if you're in one of the beta testers, you get to play it now. So let's just segue into that question. Hey, I want to be a beta tester for Twinleaf. Joe, how do I go about doing that if I'm someone who's really interested in testing out the game, providing feedback? What's the procedure?
Just join our Discord, message our moderator Shutterstock, give him basic background of how long you've been playing, any major achievements you may have had in the game, whether that's like regional runs, online tournaments, anything that kind of shows us that you have a understanding of the game and how it should function. We're not always necessarily looking for the top content creators, which we will give you an invite for sure. But if you're just an average player or like maybe just an above average player who I can trust that you understand how every ruling should carry out, that's kind of our baseline. Because if we made something incorrect and you don't catch it, if an interaction isn't happening exactly as it should and you don't catch it, it's not entirely useful to us, right? We can't really fix it if it's not caught.
Yep.
So just message our moderators, or message me specifically if you have like accessibility issues. That's something I'm really working on right now. So anyone who's listening, if you have any like visual accessibility issues, whether it's blindness, color blindness, if you have issues using pointing devices like mice, we want to be able to make a platform that everyone can use. So I'm actually going to be working one-on-one with everyone who comes to me with accessibility issues. So if you're hearing this, just hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Discord, wherever you can find me, and we will set that up.
Cool. I'll have to talk to you. I'm actually colorblind myself, so talk to me. And then I think one of our other beta testers, I'm not going to air them out too, but someone who's been in our one of our GLC test tournaments is also colorblind too. So we got a couple colorblind people already working on it. Right now, I haven't noticed anything. I've just been loving it, and that's part of the thing is I've been getting absorbed into how awesome it is to have an online client again. So just so excited about that. So not a lot of visuals tonight, Joe, but I do have some up here. I know that these are a little bit older pictures because now you guys have the beautiful little Twinleaf logo. Like just as I was logging in to do this right beforehand, I hopped into a game and saw the beautiful little Twinleaf logo right in the middle and everything like that. But talk us to kind of like what, you said you wanted to make it aesthetically pleasing, but like when you look at the screen like this and some of the other shots that we have on Twinleaf, like what was your goal when you were making Twinleaf? And like, what do you want it to be? What are you trying to fix right now to make like these screenshots look and feel like what you want it to be?
I wanted to make something that felt kind of classic. Something where fancy visual effects don't get in the way of playing. Something where it kind of feels tabletop but converted to digital in some way or another. And something that just is just pleasing to look at on any device. I'm a graduate for user interface and user experience design, so all of my programming is knowledge that I learned myself, but I think when it comes to the actual design of it is where I shine the most. And I just wanted to create something that the cards on the board are there and everything else is just out of the way. Nothing getting in the way of playing. I don't believe in over animating. I don't believe in like over visual effects or anything like that. Just I want the cards down and that's it.
Yeah, and I can respect that. I mean, it's great because you're focusing on what's happening in the moment. There's not the little like sound effects thing. So if you're a streamer like me, you don't have to worry about, dealing with like the audio issues that come from sound effects being too loud and bothering your listeners from time to time, or even like background music that can be a little bit annoying. And it really just lets you focus on the game and what it's supposed to be about. And, the deck builder here I have up on screen now too. It's changed a lot since I've been part of the beta, and like what it looks like right now is just pretty and great. And like when I get to show people, like when I'm streaming the Twinleaf tournaments and I'm trying to talk through my deck list, it's so nice to just be able to like pull this up and like click over and hover over cards. Like it has been great. Again, I'm so excited about it. I don't know if you guys can tell based on my voice. I think the first time that we streamed the first GLC tournament, like the first like 10 minutes, people were like, base is just cheesing over this. And I was like, yeah, I'm so excited about every aspect
I
of
love
it.
that.
Um,
I love that. That's what we want. We want people to be excited to play again. I can't tell you. I honestly, what I want to do on launch day. I have a collection of tweets and just various things, whether they were tweeted at me directly or people sent them to me, of just like this disdain for what we have right now with live. And I kind of want to get them all like printed and framed and like stick them behind me for every time that I go and stream. And I know that a lot of the people that I've invited that have tweeted those things out have loved what we've done. So like hearing how happy you are, hearing how happy the community has been is why we do it. And it's why it's taking so long, right? We don't want to give you something that is just as bad, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate that a ton. I mean, obviously, like, you know, when we're talking about Twinleaf and where Twinleaf is at, one of the things we have to talk about is like format accessibility. Right now, the only thing I can play on live, which is the reason why I have never played a single game on live, is that standard is not for me. I've realized that. And so I see all these people tweeting about how, you know, bad live is. Well, that doesn't really resonate with me. The only thing that does resonate with me, and which is the reason why I'm so hyped on Twinleaf, is that I want to play my format. So, Joe, what am I looking for in terms of formats on Twinleaf? Like day one, when you guys are preparing to show it off, what do you expect there to be? And then maybe in the future, are you planning on adding more from that point as well?
Oh, for sure. We want everyone to be able to play every format. I'm talking whether you want to do different people consider retro to be different things. Like some people will consider anything from like Ruby Sapphire as retro. Retro to me, I guess just because of my age, is like base to Neo series. Uh, so what I want day one is based fossil as far as retro goes. I want GLC with the most popular cards that there are. I know we're probably missing some that some people might want that aren't like, not that they're not meta, but they're not what everyone would play. Um, but we want just any. If you pull up any popular fighting deck list for GLC, I want every card that you could come across to be there. Same with any other typing. And then of course standard. We want two types of standard. I want what is the name of it? Cosmic Eclipse. Cosmic Eclipse to Evolving Skies, I think, which is like the simplified Chinese standard format right now, I believe. Um, and I want, of course, our standard, but I also want what we're calling standard nightly, which is essentially like anything that you see announced on Twitter. Um, I want it in the game. I want it in the simulator like next day tops, maybe 48 hours. And I do want to separate it because right now it's kind of the same, but I do want to separate it so that some people, if they want to just play standard as it is, they can do that. But I want to also have people be able to test cards that aren't going to be out for 3, 4, 5 months.
I mean, that's one of the big things I see from you on Twitter. It's like, you know, I see a card spoiled and people are excited about it. And then all of a sudden I see you posting screenshots of like that card being used and you're like, we got it. And I'm just like, wow, that's such a quick turnaround. And like, you know, obviously that's kind of leading into this next thing. You know, why are we going to pick Twinleaf over live? And I know you mentioned people's disdain for it. Now we're seeing you putting in cards. Why Twinleaf over live, Joe, in your opinion?
I think it really depends on what you're going for. I see live as a game, and that's not a bad thing. You know, Pokemon is a card game, but I don't take live seriously. So when I'm trying to test for an upcoming tournament, I'm not using live because I don't take those games seriously. They're not ideal games of Pokemon. And I don't know if that makes sense to a lot of people, but the games that are on there are not even just like strange deck choices by other players, but just some of the things you can and can't do, cards not working, etc., etc. You can't take it as seriously testing because you're spending more time waiting for things to happen than you are actually playing Pokemon. I want Twinleaf to primarily be used for testing. I think like as a simulator, that's its best feature is just being able to test fast, right? No anime like a 20-30 minute game of Pokemon in live can take about 10 minutes in Twinleaf, just from eliminating all of the animations and things like that, right? Um, and the reason I say testing is because the amount of people that we had flock to us in that space between NAIC to Worlds to test for Worlds was huge. There was a ton of Worlds testing that was done on Twinleaf because the format was on Twinleaf, but it wasn't on live, right? Shrouded Fable did not exist on live. For I don't know the math exactly, maybe like a couple weeks before Worlds. We didn't have Shrouded Fable very long before Worlds, and that hurts people that don't have proper ways to test. Maybe they have to do like webcam tabletop or something like that, but that's not always a great way to test, right? Like a digital solution needs to exist for us, and I'm not saying live needs to have future formats on at any time, but as a testing tool for competitive players, regardless of the format you're playing, I think something like Twinleaf is necessary.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's one of the things I love about Twinleaf 2 right now. The only way for us to play Gym Leader Challenge is webcam, and finding a webcam game, setting up for webcam can be difficult. It is fun. There's obviously the social element that comes with webcam games, but like when you're just like, hey, I have this idea and I want to test it, like Twinleaf is the place to go. The same thing for content creators. I see this being, in my eyes, like the biggest boom. There is a lack of Gym Leader Challenge content out there for people, and most of what we see people looking at are like Twitter post of deck list, or what Tricky Jim does. And so like this just giving those creative souls out there like another way to show what they're doing in a format that isn't represented anywhere else is just, I think it's going to be so huge. And again, I know, Joe, I don't think you don't think of yourself this way, I'm sure, but you are a Gym Leader Challenge hero, because this is going to be game changing for the format, which was seeing a lot of growth with PTCGO and like was booming. Yeah. And then March 22nd or 23rd of 2023, all of a sudden it was gone. And we were like, how do we play? And so that's where you stepped in. I can't tell you, I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, I didn't discover Gym Leader Challenge, unfortunately, until after I made the transition to live, which was kind of devastating for me because I had always wanted to kind of learn Sorry, I see my dog's like tail wagging in the back. I kind of always wanted to learn the format, learn about older cards, and like as a result, I never got to, right? And that's kind of why I brought Eric in, is because I didn't know. I didn't know what was good in the format. I didn't know how some interactions might work because like those interactions just don't exist in the standard format. And yeah, I mean, it just not having that as an option to play on the official client alienated me from being able to ever try the format out in the first place. I'm not going to go and like buy all these decks. They're expensive, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, I think Gym Leader Challenge is, like, relatively cheap, but still, like, if you're not sold on it spending $40-50, and when I say relatively cheap, I have a Magic background, so I'm used to spending, like, $100 on a card, so...
But compared to Standard, where you can build Miraidon EX for, what, $20?
Yeah. I mean, if you're buying Grass, like Roserade itself is that, and then like Shining Genesect is like a $10 to $16 card depending on what time you buy it. So yeah, this is definitely a lot more expensive than Standard, which again I don't have a lot of base for. So happy that you're on to tell us all this. But yeah, I mean, we need people to see it. We need people to play it. We need people to experience it, and that to me is just what Twinleaf is going to be all about, at least from my perspective. I know that people will be testing it for Worlds, and there'll be a more competitive standard scene on there, but just can't wait for like to see Gym Leader Challenge and how this changes the game.
Yeah, and I do really want to see content made for it. As anti-animation as I am, we do plan on adding some that are optional, so like you can toggle them on and off. I won't have them on when I'm testing, but I'll have them on when I'm streaming, for example. Just it makes it a little more enjoyable to the viewer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really want to see more content come out of it for other formats. I don't care what format. Just I want to see other formats on YouTube. I love standards so much, but I want to watch other formats sometimes, and we don't have it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I want to see base set to fossil. I want to be able to participate in base set to fossil tournaments if that's my groove. I want to be able to play my bad Dragonite deck in that format. That's what I want to be able to do, and so excited 100%. That Twinleaf is happening for that. Well, hey, you and your crew, you're building this wonderful simulator, this online client that we're all hoping to use at some point in the future, what are some of the things that you've just kind of like you've struggled with or that have been kind of obstacles in your way?
Hmm, that's a good question. We've had many, honestly. I guess in order to explain some of them, I would have to explain kind of how the engine is made. Um, and I'm someone who used to make a lot of games in the Unity engine, which is what Live is developed in. And as a result, whenever I see a bug come up in Live, I know exactly what's causing it. Um, and it's usually how can I simplify this? Okay, so in Unity, when you're making a card, let's say, and you're adding the effects to it, so let's use Squawkabilly EX as an example. When you're adding that ability, or on your first turn, you can discard your hand and draw 6, that's what's called a prefab. Now, a prefab is basically a block of code that can be shared with other cards, right? So if there's any other cards in the game that draw until whatever, like Cricketune V can draw until 3, the Barrel can draw until 5. I think there's a Oranguru from GLC that draws until 3. Um, what the devs at Live would do is they would use a prefab that's basically draw until, and they'd plug that in every card that has that, right? And usually when these bugs come up, any card that shares that type of ability has that bug, right? And we've seen it with a lot of cards. We've seen it with mostly energy acceleration cards in Live. Um, that like if this one has the bug, oh, then that one must too, because they all kind of share the same code. The biggest challenge we've had is none of our cards share the same code. Every card is built 100% on its own. And sure, we may copy and paste some code here and there, like from one to the other. But what I mean by they don't share the code is changing one card will never change another card. And this has allowed us to kind of isolate issues. This has allowed us to basically like figure out interactions a lot better. A good example would be um, what was it that came up recently? Oh, it was the Greninja EX, where if you attack with the attack where you discard energy and you discard the double turbo in Live, not it was allowing you to do full damage instead of the -20 because it was discarding the energy. That's not how it happens, right? Damage occurs first and then the card discards, right? In order for them to change that, they had to change every attack that discards energy and then having the damage apply. Like they had to change that prefab, and that applied to every single card that discards energy for attacks. We don't want that. We want it to be way more modular. We want it to be, if one card is having an issue, just that one card is having an issue. I think that's kind of been the biggest challenge, is making sure that we're not having issues spread across every ability or attack type.
Awesome. Yeah, that's interesting to see. I'm learning stuff about coding as we go. Not much of a coder myself, so the way you explained it was perfectly for me. So I'm hoping that our viewers and listeners will also feel the same way. Before we move on, I mean, are there any other things that you just feel like were like huge challenges? Obviously, I know that like the way that you started was, interesting, already being kind of an existing thing that you hopped onto and started working with. Things with Dan later on. Was there anything else that just kind of came up as an obstacle as you were working, besides maybe some of these coding issues with singular cards and the prefab stuff that you mentioned?
I think something that I don't know if I'd call it I think I'd call it the exact opposite of an obstacle. But what I had at the beginning was no one knew who I was. Everyone in the Tricky Gym community was very supportive of what I was doing, but it wasn't really until Dan posted his tweet and everyone from the Tricky Gym community started tagging me in it, which caused him to reach out to me. Um, I think like one of the obstacles I was facing was just like, are people going to use this? Like, are people going to know who I am? Are people going to take a chance on this? Um, will I have the resources to get far with this? And I really got to shout out the Tricky Gym community for just believing in me to let Dan know who I was. Without that, none of this would be happening, right? Because when I first joined the Twinleaf team, they were unsure that they wanted to use my engine. They were unsure that they wanted to even do automated. I mean, they wanted to do like a manual simulator with like some automation. It's like everything's manual, but if you play Professor's Research, it discards your hand and draws 7 cards. But not like if I, if I use an ability that puts an energy that accelerates energy, like that's manual. And it's like I want everything automated, right? I have this engine. And it was really tough, like kind of getting the team at first to believe in this engine and believe what I had made. I should say what me and Keshi made. Keshi's who made the original Replay engine, but um, yeah, I think that was like the biggest obstacle really was just having Dan really think that there was something there.
I'm so happy that he did because again, I'm still just so much enjoying this, and having GLC be available to me is a dream come true for me, at least at this point. Um,
Yeah,
it's
and we made a manual simulator. We did. We ended up making a manual simulator. We didn't put it out. It's pretty much exactly the same as the Limitless one, um, because that's open sourced. But we just didn't really see a reason if the Limitless one already exists, right? So that's kind of, I think we spent a lot of time. We spent like months really just figuring things out
yeah.
before we actually got to work.
Well, I'm so excited too that this is automated because, when you think about newer players hopping into this, which is what a lot of newer GLC players will be doing, a lot of those rules interactions that you mentioned that were a little bit complicated, having an automated sim like teaches you the rules to a certain degree, right? Like, oh, hey, I can't do this or I can't do that when this is in play. And even just now, I got a little error message that like while I was playing, it was like, hey, an effect on the board is causing this ability not to work. And I was like, oh, great. Look, this is letting me know that there's something on the board that's doing that. It's just great to see an automated sim again. Cause like I've played PvP, it's like the online digital app or whatever, one of them, and it's a little clunky at times. There's weird interactions that come up, like how do you do Mallow in one of those online sims where if you're playing against someone else where you stack 2 cards on top of your deck where there's not like a space for you like put 2 cards face down and then put them just
Right,
weird interactions
exactly.
like that come up in Gym Leader Challenge. And so having the automated sim just be like, here you go, is still great. So again, 100%
Even like simple
with you.
interactions, like I make the mistake all the time. When I was at my locals last week, I was facing an item lock deck, and I played an item. My opponent's like, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, I completely forgot. Like I forgot that I got item locked this turn. And if you're playing on a manual simulator and you follow through with your turn, you could be doing a lot of damage to the board state before you realize that I shouldn't have done that because I was not allowed to do that in the first place, right? And yeah, I think automated is just what the community needs because there's, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 manual simulators at this point, and they're all fine.
Yeah, they're all fine. There's a plethora of them. People are playing Gym Leader Challenge, using those all the time. Again, for me, I'm old. I'm stuck in my ways. I'd rather do
Yeah, I'm the same way.
webcam over those
Mm-hmm.
clients, but Twinleaf is where it's at right now.
Yeah, give me experience like playing cards physically or give me automated. I want nothing in between, honestly.
I feel that way too. Well, all right. So you've got this wonderful online client and this wonderful TCG simulator that you've been working on. You want people to flock to it. Like you mentioned, you have all these different formats that you're going to include. You're going to have future cards available on it. You're going to have other formats that aren't available online for people. We got to talk a little bit about the legal side because we're asking people to invest time into your client, right? And we've seen recently a very similar idea and a very similar concept pop up with the card game Lorcana, where Pixelborn was the online client that was created. It had the imaging, the same image applications that you mentioned, where there weren't any images. People had to go to a separate place to get the images if they wanted to do that. Disney or Ravensburger, I think is the company that ended up actually producing the card game, sends a cease and desist order. And the person in charge of Pixelborn decides to shut it down. And Pixelborn is there. There's no longer a way to play Lorcana online. Is this something we expect to see happening with Twinleaf and this simulator?
It's really a shame, honestly, what happened with Pixelborn. I wanted to get into that as well. Not having an online client to do that killed any chance of me ever playing the game. I actually had conversations with some other people that have made simulators that are, in a gray area. I tried to talk with the creator of Pixelborn. We weren't ever able to connect. We weren't ever able to find a time to have a call. But I spoke with some people who, had worked with TCG1 or Pokemon Showdown at some point, and kind of just asked them, like, what are you doing that lets you do this? And we got a lot of answers that were interesting. I worked with some people who made what was it called? Dueling Book, I think it was what it was called, the Yu-Gi-Oh one. It's like a Yu-Gi-Oh manual simulator. Um, but even still, even all of their answers didn't really help. We wanted to do something where we wouldn't even have to worry about it at all. So we did a lot of legal research. My wife used to work in law, so she was of great help. Um, and what it really comes down to is two things. In American copyright law, you cannot copyright game rules because it promotes monopoly. Not the game monopoly, but it promotes like a company having a monopoly over a set of rules. Um, so any card game rules fall under that. So you can't copyright game rules essentially. Like it's simple as that, right? But when it comes down to it, it's the IP. That's what everyone is kind of like talking about when they think Twinleaf could face a lot of issues. But you may have mentioned earlier in the podcast, when we first started, I mentioned that we're working on a card image system where people will kind of have to figure out how to get their card images in there. Um, we're not shipping anything with pictures of any Pokemon. We're not shipping anything with any. If you look at the simulator when it's out, every card is just going to be the Twinleaf logo, and it'll have like the card set name on it, and you kind of got to figure out what it is. You click the card, you see all the effects and the attacks and everything, but people are just going to have to figure out how to make the cards appear as they do. Um, and that's kind of up to the users to figure out. But that is essentially what will allow us to do what we're doing. We don't want to infringe on anything that the Pokemon Company is doing. Yeah.
Yep, and it should be stated too that the creator of Lorcana basically said at the beginning of all of everything they'd ever done, if Ravensburger ever came and said, please stop doing this, that they would gladly stop doing it without putting up any sort of legal battle. So it wasn't actually any sort of legal action that was taken. It was just a cease and desist letter that was sent.
For sure. Yeah.
And the Lorcana person said, cool. Because even though they were following kind of all the same things, they probably would have been allowed to do this, they just didn't see
They weren't
point.
entirely. I mean, when you would go on Pixelborn's website, when you download the client, there's a link right next to it that says download all the card images, which is kind of like the mistake there, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like distributing at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I will say, like,
that being said, like there are ways. Sorry, just so I can just so people can kind of understand. There are other ways for, like, you may be wondering, okay, well, how does Limitless have their card images in their simulator? Well, they're a news website, right? They're a player tool website. They store statistics for major tournaments and things like that. So it's informational, right? And there are certain they're not using Pokemon cards for any purpose other than providing information. And that's kind of what we're doing in the same way, right? Like, we want to open source Twinleaf immediately. It is completely an educational product at that point. It is a project that we want people to learn how to code themselves. They can download our source code and kind of figure out how we did it, and they can make whatever they want with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And going back to the Lorcana point, like what you mentioned, when that client stopped existing, that's when I stopped playing Lorcana. I have cards up here that just like I'm never gonna like probably physically be able to go and play anymore, just because I don't know what
Mhm.
the meta is. I don't know what good cards do anymore. And if I'm going to dedicate an hour or two to my time to go and play something, I want to play something that I know that I'm going to enjoy and have fun and have the cards that I want to do that
Mhm.
with. And so it's kind of a
For
shame
sure.
what happened, but you get it, and yeah, we'll just move on from there.
Yeah, and from what I understand, it's an expensive game, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
can
it,
be.
it definitely started out with kind of the not enough printing issue, right? Like they printed the first
Mm,
set and there weren't enough, and it's got Disney slapped on it, so there were a lot of collectors that came out of the woodworks and people buying up the cards. And then the second run of those same printings didn't come till much later, so you were sitting on cards that
mm,
probably should be in like the $5 to $10 range, being more of like the $50 to $100 range. And it kind of like made the card game really inaccessible at first, and you couldn't even find product. Like you couldn't find the starter decks, you couldn't
right.
find
Mhm.
any of the stuff. So Lorcana was really kind of the only way to really engage in it, and I think maybe that's why Lorcana lasted as long as it did, is it did kind of like settle people into what the game was going to be until they could finally get the product. And I think Ravensburger felt like they were probably in a place where they could get the product to everyone. I won't speak about what companies and industries want to do, but about their motivations and whatnot. But again, it shut down, and now you're in a place where the cards are much cheaper. But I don't know what the card game has looked like because I haven't played it in the last couple months.
Yeah, so if anyone from Disney or Ravensburger is watching this, give us a client. We want to play.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to play Lorcana. I think it's actually a very well designed game in all aspects. Like the actual rules of the game itself really make
Mhm.
like you don't really get like in Magic. Sometimes you don't draw your Magic like your energy cards, and in Pokemon sometimes you don't draw the same energy cards, which I guess is mana and Magic. But in Lorcana, like your playing cards are your resources, so it kind of lets everyone kind of play the game, which I really really enjoy
Mhm.
from like that perspective. And then like the different ways you can go about the game, like whether you ink or whether you go to combat and different things like that, was just really interesting and made for a kind of refreshing card game, but had some of the same mechanics that you see in other ones. So anyway, I
Right.
miss
Yeah, and I
Lorcana a
like
bit.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I've kind of been looking into Electrodes a little bit as like a alternative of like not even just like an alternative game to play, but like maybe potentially starting a fan client on that. And it kind of follows the same, like a kind of like a blend of Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon in a sense. And it sounds pretty similar to Lorcana in that sense. Yeah, so if you want to know of a what's next for Joe, then like maybe an Electrodes client. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that was what's up next for the Twinleaf team. So yeah, maybe an Illustrials fan made client. That sounds pretty sweet. Any other big news? I know that. So the other two kind of main Twinleaf developers that I know of, at least, are Tommy and Eric, and both of them are kind of like pretty occupied. You've been busy as well. So what are kind of the next big things for Twinleaf and for other projects that you guys have going on?
For Twinleaf, I would say just kind of starting on other formats. Starting to dive into Expanded a little bit. I did an update recently with I don't know how many cards, but enough cards that kind of fill some of the staples that are missing for Expanded. There's still dozens more to do. Um, I guess just working with members of the community in their respective formats to do the best we can to deliver that format. So Expanded for me, I know Tommy is going to continue on GLC. Eric kind of splits his time between GLC and like engine and server stuff. And then I split my time between standard, future nightly standard, expanded, and the front end client side primarily. Um, so yeah, I guess just more formats, more cards, more hopefully um, just like better ways to use the simulator as well. I mean, I want to do like matchmaking at some point. Um, we're gonna start working with Azul on a tournament series that I believe we're running weekly with cash prizing, um, which will be sponsored by Eric's company, Heavily Played. If you need cards, check out Heavily Played. That will be launching soon. It's kind of like Eric's side project right now. Um, yeah, so weekly tournament, I believe, standard probably, and hopefully expanded coming to Twinleaf soon.
Yeah. And the way you guys go about like adding new cards for older formats, I think it's just great too. Like, for the beta testers right now anyway, there's just like an Excel sheet and like, hey, if you want a card added that's not up already, because basically all the decks up on Tricky Gem are up there, and then a couple that are like a little bit more prominent up there too. So there's at least like maybe 2 or 3 for each type, and then obviously all the cards in standard that you could add into those. So you have a pretty robust set of Gem Winner Challenge cards on there already. But there's a card that's missing. Like there's an Arboliva that I really enjoy to play in my crazy Meganium Torterra deck, and I just go into the list and I add Arboliva on there, and at some point you, Tommy, or Eric will get around to it, and that card will be added on, and I'll be able to play that deck, and everyone can add in. The only one I will say, which I found hilarious, was someone added a fairy section, and I can't remember who it was, that just was like, no, they're probably not happening.
Like the 3 fairy cards that exist.
Yeah. That gave me a good
the Arboliva is the one that from Scarlet Violet base, I think. That's the one?
Yep. The one that heals. It's on there already. It's one of my favorite cards. Okay. I say this like every single podcast episode or every stream, but my son's name is Oliver, and so we called him Small Oliver or Smalliver when he was younger. So Smoliv, which is a game that came out at the same time, is just my favorite, which is why I have my little Smoliv back here. So I gotta pay homage to my kid.
I will have that Arboliva live tonight, let's say.
I feel like I get so much preferential treatment because like you're putting Arboliva on there for me. Ninja Boy, I'm pretty sure only exists in the game because Weeder was like, hey, what cards do you want? And I was like, put Ninja Boy on there. I don't think anyone else is going to play
What does Ninja Boy do? Let me just look that up real quick.
Ninja Boy is...
search for...
Yeah, it's Thorton from the deck instead of the discard.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and that's kind of like, that's what makes a lot of it easy. It's like a lot of cards that are popular and expanded have... I guess like a nerfed version in or like what's popular, in GLC, have like a nerfed version in standard right now, which kind of makes it easy. Like if it's Thorton from the deck, we literally can just copy the Thorton code and switch it from switch it from discard to deck, right?
Yeah.
But what I like doing recently, what I've had a lot of fun on, is working on cards that just don't exist yet, like functions that don't exist in the engine yet. That's my favorite part for sure. Like I don't think we have anything that just heals all Pokemon. Or it heals all damage for one Pokemon. You might. There's maybe have like some kind of like potion or
there's Max Potion, which I know exists for Weeder's Leviathan deck, which is an item card, and then there is maybe Cheryl that heals from Evolutions, which I know was in the Ursaluna deck. So there's a couple that do similar things if you're looking for cards to copy from.
I don't think we do on a Pokemon, right? Because we actually separate card effects depending on what depending on what archetype of a card it is. Like if it's a trainer. Some of the card effects on a trainer, you can't put them on a Pokemon unless you like recode that function to also work with Pokemon.
Yeah, makes sense. I know one of the cards that's probably like the hardest card to code, which when I was talking to Weeder about was there's like a base set Electrode that like knocks itself out and then attaches as energy, and I'm just like I don't even know how you guys go about coding a card like that.
Been working on that for so long. I'm starting to get somewhere with it, but has this weird issue where as soon as you attach it, it just like becomes that Pokemon.
Weird.
So like, let's just say you have like a Charmander in the active, you pop the Electrode, you choose Fire, drag it onto the Charmander. Well, now your Charmander has evolved into an Electrode for some reason.
All right. I mean, that's kind of funny. I kind of hope that bug stays around for a bit for me to check it out. But yeah, I mean, there's some crazy interactions. Like I know, like Serge, I think, has still had some bugs like that. It's just a card that's so unique, right? Like Serge lets you play 2 extra supporters for turn. So I was trying to play it the other day, and like I could play Serge, and I happen to have VS Seeker in my hand, so I couldn't play any of the other supporters in my hand. But just to make sure I was doing my due diligence, I VS Seeker for Serge, and I could play Serge again. So it was just like, okay, this card obviously is just a nightmare to code. But I'm sure that you guys.
Yeah, I mean, Eric did Serge himself. When I did the supporter system in general, it was a true or false, right? True, you played a supporter? Well, you can't play another one, right? False, you didn't? Well, you can play one. We had to change it to essentially like a number system, where if you play a supporter, your supporter for turn number goes to 1. And if you play Lieutenant Surge, it goes to -1. Right? Was that? Yeah, because then if you play another supporter, it goes to 0, and then you play another supporter, it goes to 1, and then you can't play a supporter again. And that works, but like having to change every single supporter to basically like work with that function.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it took Eric quite some time.
Yeah, no, I gotcha. Yeah, that's again, some of these cards are some of the interactions are great and fun, and then yeah, you don't think about them sometimes, and the fact of like how do you code this, how do you make this work on an online digital client. So kudos to you guys for doing that, because again, that's a little bit out of my realm of expertise. But if you need a
I
Spanish
mean,
teacher, let me know.
we definitely have like brainstorming sessions where we'll like put a card in front of us and be like, okay, Tommy, how would you do this? Eric, how would you do this? Charlie, how would you? And we kind of just like figure out like what the best way to do it is. Um, yeah, Lieutenant Surge is definitely one of them that I think Eric is actually working on at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully by tomorrow it'll be fixed.
That's great. Yeah, love it. Well, Joe, I mean, thank you so much for being on. I don't have really anything else to say. I mean, is there anything else, any closing thoughts on Twinleaf that you want to say before we kind of step off?
I think just one thing, and it's really just something that has been talked about a lot by the beta testers privately on the Discord, not really too much publicly, but essentially just reassurance that when a bug comes up in Twinleaf, we do everything we can to fix it within at least 24 hours, 48 at the most. Sometimes, like Lieutenant Surge, we have things that go a lot longer than that. Things can be complicated sometimes. But we always are communicating that we're working on it. We're always trying to reassure you and like even explain to the community like why it's not working as it should. And yeah, I just want to let people know that it will have bugs. It's going to have bugs like any piece of software does. But let us know and we will try to fix it as quickly as we can. We do nightly updates. Every night at midnight, it gets an update, and it will give a huge list of all the bugs we fixed. Thankfully, that list is getting smaller and smaller. So just in case anyone has been a little hesitant on their belief in it, I can tell you that we handle things that are wrong a lot differently. So hopefully that gives some reassurance.
Yeah, I mean, let me just step in here and say a couple things. Number one, like a month ago when I started playing with Weeder, like it was hard to finish a game in Gym Weeder Challenge. And then where it's at now, like the gameplay is so crisp and clean, and we can get games done. And obviously, I've been streaming the tournaments that we have, and every time I pull up my list, it's really smooth. I mean, our first tournament that we played, and you were part of that tournament, Joe, that first GLC Twinleaf tournament, there was an issue with Zebstrika, and it got fixed like in between rounds. Like that's how quick you guys were. And then, I had an issue, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, where like my Weavile was doing extra damage. As a beta tester, I just take a screenshot, I submit the screenshot, give a quick explanation of what happened. Weavile was doing like extra base damage. It was fixed within, 24 hours. I mean, the way that you guys go about fixing all of these bugs is just like it's just night and day from what I hear about the issues that people are having with live, where like cards aren't playable or they have to ban cards because they don't know how to do them. Just like that sort of issue. It's really refreshing. It shows how on the ball you all are, and it just shows that like you guys care. I think like that's the big thing, right? Like you don't step into a fan-made client that you're trying to create without like loving and caring about the game. And like between you, Tommy, Eric, and I don't know Charlie at all, but because he's in part of this project, I have to assume that he just cares and loves this game so much, and that's what this is. It feels like just a product of love. Is that how you feel about it too?
Oh, 100%. I don't think I've ever loved a game this much, honestly. And I haven't been in the community nearly as long as these other guys that are working on it with me. I mean, the whole reason that Dan brought us together was his love of it too, right? He, as someone who just enjoys the game, was frustrated playing it. And he felt that he, as someone who's in a position with a platform, could do something about it. And that's just our tagline, right? We've always said like Twinleaf is by fans for fans, and that's just how we feel. We love this game so much, and we want everyone to be able to play and experience it just perfectly every time.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And that's a great way for us to sign off here. So Joe, thank you so much. It was so enlightening to talk to you, to hear about Twinleaf's journey from beginning to where it is now, to hear about obviously your passion for coding and obviously all the knowledge that you bring to the table and what the Twinleaf team has been doing. So again, thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to do this. I want to do it more. I mean, I plan on getting a bit more into GLC, so maybe next time I'm here, it'll be just about GLC.
All right. I can't wait. That sounds like a promise, so I'm going to hold you to it. Well, all right, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Let Loose, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge and the Pokemon TCG. We'll be back next week. You guys have a great night. Bye-bye.